The throne room of the Valoran Empire was the most beautiful place in the known galaxy. Giant crystal pillars rose from the floor to the ceiling, each one glowing with soft blue light. The floor was made of polished stone that showed the reflection of everyone who walked upon it. At the far end of the room sat the crystal throne, and upon it sat Queen Sora. Ruler of 12 star systems, Queen Sora was over 900 years old, but she looked no older than a woman of 40. Her skin was pale like moonlight, and her eyes were silver like 2 small moons themselves. Her white hair fell past her shoulders like a frozen waterfall. She wore robes made of fabric that seemed to flow like water. Changing color as she moved, the Valoran people lived for thousands of years. They were tall and graceful, with pointed ears and eyes that could see in the dark. They believed in logic above all things. Emotions were considered dangerous, something to be controlled and hidden away. A Valoran who showed too much feeling was seen as weak and foolish. Today, the throne room was filled with nobles from across the empire. They stood in long rows, dressed in their finest clothes, waiting for the arrival of Princess Yuna. The princess had been away for 3 years on a diplomatic mission to the outer rim of the galaxy. Now she was finally coming home. Queen Sora sat very still on her throne. Her face showed nothing, but inside she felt something close to worry. Her spies had sent her strange reports about her daughter. They said the princess had changed during her time away. They said she smiled more often. They said she had been seen laughing with the soldiers. Laughing. A princess of the Valoran Empire. Laughing like some common creature. The great doors at the end of the hall swung open. A servant announced in a loud voice that Princess Yuna had arrived. The nobles turned to look. And a soft murmur passed through the crowd. Princess Yuna walked into the throne room with her head held high. She was beautiful in the way all Valoran women were beautiful, with the same pale skin and silver eyes as her mother, but there was something different about her now. She moved with a new kind of energy, as if she carried sunlight inside her chest. And on her face was a small smile that did not go away. But it was not her smile that made the nobles gasp. It was the ring on her finger. The ring was simple and silver, nothing like the jeweled bands worn by Valoran nobility. It sat on her left hand, and it seemed to pulse with a soft, warm light that no one recognized. Queen Sora rose slowly from her throne. The entire room fell silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. "Daughter," the queen said, her voice calm but cold, "what is that upon your hand?" Princess Yuna stopped in the middle of the throne room. She looked down at the ring, and her smile grew wider. When she looked back up at her mother, there was no fear in her eyes. "It is a wedding ring, mother." The silence that followed was like the silence before a storm. Then the storm came. Nobles shouted in shock and anger. Advisors turned to each other with wide eyes. Military commanders put their hands on their weapons, as if expecting an attack. Queen Sora raised one hand, and the room fell silent again. She walked down the steps from her throne, her robes flowing behind her like silver smoke. She stopped in front of her daughter and looked at her with those cold, silver eyes. "You married without the blessing of the crown," the queen said. "You know the law? Royal marriages must be approved by the throne. They are political matters, not personal ones." "I know the law, mother." "Then you chose to break it." The queen's voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now, sharp as a blade. "Tell me who he is. What noble house does he come from? What empire dared to take my heir without my permission?" Princess Yuna took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been preparing for during the entire journey home. She had practiced what she would say 100 times. But now, standing before her mother and the entire court, the words felt heavy in her mouth. "His name is Han," she said. "He is not from any noble house. He is not from any empire, you know." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Explain yourself." "He is human, mother. He comes from a small planet called Earth." For a long moment, Queen Sora did not move. She did not speak. She simply stared at her daughter as if she had spoken in a language no one understood. Then the throne room erupted once more. "A human?" someone shouted. "She married a human." "This is madness," cried High Advisor Jay, pushing his way to the front of the crowd. He was an old Valoran with thin white hair and eyes that were always looking for problems. Humans are primitives. They live less than 100 years. They are weak and fragile and completely unsuitable for royal blood. Military Commander Day stepped forward as well. He was a large Valoran with scars on his face from centuries of battle. The humans are barely able to travel between stars. Their technology is crude. Their society is chaotic. They fight wars among themselves like animals. Princess Yuna turned to face them, and there was fire in her eyes. "You speak of things you do not understand." "We understand enough," Advisor Jay sneered. "We understand that you have brought shame upon the throne, that you have thrown away your future for some short-lived creature who will be dead before your next birthday celebration." "Enough." Queen Sora's voice cut through the noise like a knife through silk. Everyone fell silent and turned to look at her. The queen walked in a slow circle around her daughter, studying her as if she were some strange artifact brought back from a distant world. Finally, she stopped and stood face to face with Princess Yuna. "A human," she said softly. "You gave your heart to a human." "Yes, mother." "A species that cannot survive in the void of space without machines. A species that bleeds from the smallest wound. A species that ages and dies while we remain young." The queen shook her head slowly. "What could such a creature possibly offer you?" Princess Yuna reached up and touched the ring on her finger. When she spoke, her voice was strong and clear. "He offered me something I never knew I was missing. He showed me how to feel without shame. He taught me that a short life can hold more meaning than 1,000 years of emptiness." She looked her mother directly in the eyes. "He is the greatest being I've ever known." Queen Sora stared at her daughter for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back to her throne. She sat down slowly, her face as cold and unreadable as ever. "Bring him to me," she commanded. "Bring this human to the throne room. Let us see what kind of creature has stolen the heart of a Valoran princess." Princess Yuna bowed her head slightly. "As you wish, mother." As she turned and walked out of the throne room, she could feel the eyes of every noble upon her back. She could hear their whispers, full of shock and disgust and disbelief. But she did not care, because she knew something they did not. They were about to meet a human, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. 3 years before the day Princess Yuna returned to the throne room, she had been a very different person. She was cold and logical, like all Valoran nobility were supposed to be. She spoke only when necessary. She never smiled without reason. She believed that emotions were weakness, and weakness was something she could not afford. Her diplomatic ship was called the Eternal Dawn. It was a beautiful vessel, long and silver, with engines that could cross half the galaxy in a matter of weeks. The princess was traveling to the Outer Rim territories to negotiate trade agreements with several smaller civilizations. It was boring work, but important work. She did it without complaint. The ship carried 50 Valoran soldiers for protection. They were tall and strong, trained in the art of combat since childhood. They carried plasma rifles and wore armor made of the strongest metals in the Empire. Everyone believed they were more than enough to keep the princess safe. Everyone was wrong. The attack came without warning. The Eternal Dawn was passing through the Rakan Nebula, a cloud of purple and gold gases that stretched across 3 star systems. It was supposed to be a safe route, but hidden inside the nebula was a fleet of pirate ships, waiting like spiders in a web. The first blast hit the engines. The second blast hit the weapon systems. Before the Valoran soldiers could even reach their battle stations, the pirates had attached their ships to the Eternal Dawn and begun cutting through the hull. Princess Yuna remembered the sound of metal screaming as the pirates burned their way inside. She remembered the shouts of her soldiers as they ran to defend the ship. She remembered the smell of smoke and blood and fear. The pirates were not like any enemy the Valorans had trained to fight. They came from a dozen different species, all of them outcasts and criminals. They did not follow rules. They did not fight with honor. They attacked in waves, screaming and shooting, caring nothing for their own lives as long as they could kill their enemies. One by one, the Valoran soldiers fell. They were better trained and better equipped, but they were not prepared for such chaos. They tried to form defensive lines, but the pirates simply went around them. They tried to predict enemy movements, but the pirates moved without pattern or logic. Princess Yuna was taken to the safest room on the ship, a small chamber with walls made of reinforced steel. She sat there alone, listening to the sounds of battle grow closer and closer. She prepared herself for what was coming. She would be captured. She would be held for ransom. Her mother would be forced to pay whatever the pirates demanded, and the shame would follow the royal family for centuries. Then she heard something strange, a new sound, different from all the others. It was a human voice, shouting words she did not understand. And then there was gunfire, different from the plasma weapons used by everyone else. Louder, rougher, more primitive. The door to her safe room burst open, and Princess Yuna raised her hands, ready to surrender. But it was not a pirate who stood in the doorway. It was a human. He was shorter than the Valorans, with brown skin and dark hair that was wet with sweat. His eyes were brown like earth, warm and alive in a way that Valoran eyes never were. He wore simple armor, covered in burns and scratches. He held a weapon that looked ancient compared to the technology around him. There was blood on his face. Some of it was his own. "Your Highness," he said, breathing hard. "My name is Han. I am here to protect you." Princess Yuna stared at him. She knew there were humans on her ship. A small team of mercenaries had been hired as additional security, though most of the Valoran officers had considered it a waste of resources. Humans were not known for their combat abilities. They were small and weak and died easily. But this human did not look weak. He looked like a storm wrapped in skin. "Come with me," Han said. "We need to move." He led her through the ship, and she saw things she would never forget. She saw Valoran soldiers lying dead on the floor, their perfect faces frozen in surprise. She saw pirate bodies too, many of them, and she realized that this one human had killed more enemies than entire squads of her own people. At one point, a pirate jumped out from a doorway and fired at them. The shot hit Han in the shoulder, burning through his armor and into his flesh. Princess Yuna cried out, expecting him to fall. He did not fall. Han made a sound of pain through his teeth, but he kept moving. He raised his weapon with his other arm and shot the pirate dead. Then he pulled a small blade from his belt, heated it with a device on his wrist, pressed it against his own wound. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Han's face twisted in agony, but he did not scream. He simply waited until the wound was sealed, then put the blade away and continued walking. Princess Yuna could not believe what she had just seen. "Why did you not stop?" she asked. "You are injured. Logic says you should retreat and seek medical attention." Han looked at her with those strange, warm eyes, and then he did something she did not expect. He smiled.
"Where I come from, Your Highness," he said, "we have a saying.
Fall 7 times, stand up 8. That is mathematically impossible." Han laughed. It was a real laugh, full of warmth and life, even in the middle of all this death and danger. "Yeah," he said. "That is the point." He got her to safety. He and his team of humans fought through the pirates, taking wounds that should have killed them and refusing to die. By the time reinforcements arrived, the battle was over. The pirates were defeated, and Princess Yuna was safe. In the days that followed, she found herself thinking about the human called Han. She watched him as his wounds were treated, as he joked with his teammates. As he moved through the ship with that strange energy that never seemed to fade, she asked him questions. Many questions. She wanted to understand how a creature so fragile could be so strong. Han told her about Earth. He told her about a planet where nothing was easy, where survival had to be earned every single day. He told her about humans who climbed mountains that tried to kill them, who crossed oceans that wanted to swallow them, who built cities in deserts and forests and frozen wastelands. "We are not strong because we are born strong," he explained. "We are strong because we have no choice. We fight or we die." So we fight. Princess Yuna felt something stir inside her chest, something warm and unfamiliar. She did not know what it was, but she knew she wanted more of it. Over the following months, she spent more and more time with Han. He taught her to laugh without calculating whether it was appropriate. He taught her to act on instinct, instead of endless analysis. He taught her that feelings were not weakness. Feelings were what made life worth living. And when he knelt before her on a small moon at the edge of the galaxy, holding a simple ring made from metal that had belonged to his grandmother, she said the only word that mattered. Yes. Han stood before the crystal throne and tried not to show his fear. The throne room was larger than any building he had ever seen on Earth. The crystal pillars stretched so high that their tops disappeared into shadows. The polished floor reflected his image back at him like a dark mirror, making him feel small and alone. Hundreds of Valoran nobles stood in rows on either side of him, their silver eyes cold and judging. He was wearing the best clothes he owned. But compared to the flowing robes and glittering jewels of the Valorans, he looked like a beggar at a royal feast. He was shorter than everyone in the room. His skin was darker. His ears were round. Everything about him screamed that he did not belong here. But Princess Yuna stood beside him. That was all that mattered. Queen Sora sat on her throne, looking down at him like a goddess looking at an insect. Her silver eyes studied every part of him, from his simple shoes to his nervous hands to his beating heart. Han felt like she could see through his skin, through his bones, all the way down to his soul. "So," the queen said, her voice echoing through the silent hall, "this is the human." Han bowed his head. "Your Majesty may address me as Queen Sora. You have not earned the right to call me anything else." The queen leaned forward on her throne. "Tell me, human, do you understand what you have done?" "I married your daughter, Queen Sora. You stole my heir." The queen's voice was sharp. "You took the future of an empire that has stood for 10,000 years and put it in the hands of a creature who will be dead before her next century begins." Looked up and met the queen's eyes. "With respect, Queen Sora, I did not steal anything. Princess Yuna chose me. I simply chose her back." A murmur passed through the crowd. Advisor Jay stepped forward, his thin face twisted with anger. "How dare you speak to the queen in such a manner?" he demanded. "You are nothing but a primitive from a primitive world. Your entire species has existed for less time than the queen has been alive. You have no right to stand in this hall, let alone marry into the royal bloodline." Han wanted to argue, but Princess Yuna squeezed his hand, warning him to stay calm. "Enough," Queen Sora said. She rose from her throne and walked slowly down the steps. Her robes trailed behind her like liquid silver, and each step she took seemed to shake the ground beneath Han's feet. She stopped in front of him, close enough that he could see the tiny lines at the corners of her eyes, the only signs of her great age. Up close, she was even more terrifying than she had been on her throne. "My daughter believes you are worthy of her," the queen said quietly. "She believes you have qualities that make up for your obvious weaknesses. She has asked me to accept this marriage and welcome you into the royal family." Han felt a spark of hope in his chest. "And will you, Queen Sora?" "No." The word hit him like a physical blow. Behind him, Princess Yuna made a small sound of pain. "Mother," she said, stepping forward, "you cannot simply refuse. I am an adult. I have the right to choose my own partner." "You have the right to choose," Queen Sora agreed. "And I have the right to refuse to recognize that choice." She turned back to Han, her silver eyes cold as ice. "However, I am not unreasonable. I will give your human a chance to prove himself." "No," Han frowned. "Prove myself how?" "There are ancient traditions in the Valoran Empire. Every person who wishes to marry into the royal family must pass the 3 trials of bonding. These trials test the mind, the heart, and the soul. Every royal consort for 10,000 years has faced these trials." The queen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "If your human can pass the 3 trials, I will recognize your marriage. If he fails, the marriage is void, and he will be exiled from our territory forever." Princess Yuna's face went pale. "Mother, the trials were designed for Valoran physiology. Human bodies are different. Human minds work differently. You are asking him to do something that may be impossible, and he will fail, and we will know for certain that he was never worthy of you." Han looked at Princess Yuna. She was afraid. He could see it in her eyes, in the way she held his hand, in the slight trembling of her shoulders. She was afraid of losing him. He had never loved her more than he did in that moment. "I will do it," he said. The entire room fell silent. Queen Sora raised one eyebrow. "You accept the trials? You understand that they may kill you?" "I understand." "You understand that no human has ever attempted them? That we have no idea if your species can even survive the first trial?" "I understand. And yet, you still accept." Han turned to face Princess Yuna. He reached up and touched her cheek, wiping away a tear that had begun to fall. Then he turned back to the Queen. "I have spent my entire life being told what I cannot do," he said. "I was told humans cannot survive in space. We survive. I was told humans cannot fight against stronger species. We fight. I was told humans cannot love beings who live for thousands of years." He looked at Yuna again, and his heart felt like it would burst. "But I love her, and I will face any trial, any challenge, any pain to be with her." Queen Sora studied him for a long moment. Her face gave nothing away, but something flickered in her silver eyes. Something that might have been curiosity. "Very well," she said at last. "The trials will begin tomorrow at dawn. You will have no help, no assistance, no communication with anyone until they are complete." She turned and began walking back to her throne. "I suggest you say goodbye to my daughter tonight, human. It may be your last chance." The nobles began to file out of the throne room, whispering among themselves. Han heard pieces of their conversations. They were betting on how quickly he would fail. Some thought he would not survive the first hour. Others thought he might last a day before breaking. None of them believed he had any chance of success. Princess Yuna held him tightly, her face pressed against his shoulder. "You did not have to accept," she whispered. "Could have run away. We could have hidden somewhere they would never find us." Han pulled back and looked into her eyes. "And spend our lives looking over our shoulders, knowing that your mother never accepted us? Knowing that we ran away instead of standing our ground? I would rather have that than lose you." Han smiled and kissed her forehead. "You will not lose me, I promise." "How can you promise something like that?" He thought about Earth. He thought about all the impossible things humans had done throughout history. Thought about every time his species had been told something could not be done, and had done it anyway. "Because I am human," he said, "and we do not know how to give up." Princess Yuna looked at him with tears in her eyes and love in her heart. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. And somewhere deep inside, she did. The first trial was called the Trial of Endurance, and it was designed to break the mind. Han was taken to a room deep beneath the palace. The room was small and round, with walls made of black stone that seemed to absorb all light. There was no furniture, no windows, no doors that he could see. The guards who brought him there left without a word, and then the darkness came. It was not ordinary darkness. It was complete, total, absolute. Han could not see his own hand in front of his face, could not hear anything, not even the sound of his own breathing. He could not feel the temperature of the air. All of his senses had been taken away, leaving only his mind alone with itself. The Valorans called this the Chamber of Silence. It was designed to strip away everything that connected a person to the outside world. Most Valoran candidates lasted about 40 hours before they were allowed to leave. Some had gone mad in less than 20. Han sat down on the cold floor and closed his eyes. It's not that it made any difference. The first few hours were not too bad. He had been alone before. He had spent time in small spaces, in dark places, in situations where he could not see or hear. He thought about Princess Yuna. He thought about their wedding day, about the way she had smiled when she said yes. He held on to those memories like a man holding onto a rope over a dark pit. But as the hours passed, the memories started to fade. Without any input from the outside world, his mind began to turn on itself. It started showing him things. Bad things. He saw his father, who had died when Han was just a boy. He saw the war he had fought on a distant planet, the friends he had lost, the blood on his hands. He saw every failure of his life, every moment of shame, every person he had disappointed. The darkness whispered to him. It told him he was worthless. It told him he was not good enough for the princess. It told him to give up, to surrender, to let the darkness take him. Hans screamed into the void. No sound came out. He lost track of time. It might have been days. It might have been weeks. He could not tell anymore. All he knew was the darkness and the whispers and the terrible loneliness that felt like it would crush his soul. But he did not break. He thought about his grandmother, who had survived a terrible war on Earth. She had been trapped in a small room for months, alone and afraid, but she had survived. She had told him stories about those days, about how she kept herself sane by telling herself stories, by counting, by refusing to let the darkness win. Hans started counting. Started at 1 and counted as high as he could go. When he lost track, he started again. When the whispers got too loud, he counted louder. When the darkness tried to show him terrible things, he focused on the numbers. After 52 hours, the door appeared in the wall and light flooded into the chamber. Han walked out on shaking legs. His eyes hurt from the brightness. His throat was dry and cracked. But he was still himself. He had not broken. The Valoran observers stared at him in disbelief. "How?" one of them asked. "How did you last so long?" Han looked at them with red-rimmed eyes. "I spent 6 months alone on a mining colony once," he said. "This was almost peaceful." The second trial was called the Trial of Strength, and it was designed to break the heart. Han was placed inside a machine that connected directly to his brain. The machine created simulations so real that his body could not tell the difference. Whatever happened in the simulation, his mind would experience as if it were real. The simulation began. Han found himself standing in a beautiful garden with Princess Yuna. She was smiling at him, holding his hand, telling him how much she loved him. Then she died. She was killed by pirates, shot through the chest right in front of him. Han screamed and tried to save her, but it was too late. He held her body as she took her last breath, and the pain was so real that he thought his heart would stop. Then the simulation reset. They were back in the garden. Yuna was alive again. Then she died again, this time in a different way. A ship crash, a disease, an assassination. 100 deaths. That was the trial. Han had to watch the woman he loved die 100 different times. Each death more horrible than the last. By the 30th death, most candidates would break. They would beg for the simulation to stop. They would do anything to make the pain go away. Han did not beg. He did not break. Each time Yuna died in his arms, he held her, told her he loved her. He made sure she knew that she was not alone. And when the simulation reset, he prepared himself to do it again. When the 100th death came, Han was crying so hard that he could barely see. His body was shaking. His heart felt like it had been torn into a million pieces and put back together wrong. But he had not given up. He had not surrendered. He had faced every single death with open eyes and an open heart. When the machine released him, the observers were silent. They had never seen anyone complete the trial of strength without breaking at least once. "Why?" Queen Sora asked. She had come to watch this trial herself. "Why put yourself through such pain?" Han wiped the tears from his face. His voice was raw and broken, but his words were clear. "Because she is worth every single one," he said. The third trial was called the Trial of Sacrifice, and it was designed to break the soul. Han was brought to a small room where Queen Sora waited alone. On the table between them lay 2 documents. One was a contract of dissolution, which would end his marriage to Yuna immediately. The other was an offer of a new husband for the princess, a Valoran prince from an old and powerful family. "This is your final trial," Queen Sora said. "You have proven your endurance and your strength. Now you must prove your love." She pushed the first document toward him. "Sign this," she said, "and Yuna will be free to marry someone worthy of her. She will have a husband who can live as long as she does. She will have children who are not half-breeds. She will have a life of comfort and security, free from the burden of watching you grow old and die." Han looked at the document. His hand trembled. "If you truly love her," the queen continued, "you will let her go. You will sacrifice your own happiness for hers. That is what love means." Han was silent for a long moment. Then he picked up the document and tore it in half. Queen Sora's eyes widened. "What are you doing? You do not understand love. Han said. You think love means giving someone what you think they need. But that is not love. That is control. He stood up and faced the Queen directly. Love means standing beside someone while they make their own choices. Love means fighting for them, not giving up on them. Love means choosing them every single day, even when it is hard. He took a deep breath. Dying for someone is easy. Any human can do that. But living for someone, growing old with them, facing every challenge together, that is the real sacrifice, and that is what I offer to your daughter. Queen Sora stared at him for a long time. The room was so quiet that Han could hear his own heartbeat. Then, slowly, the Queen began to smile. Well, she said softly, perhaps there is more to humans than I thought. The news spread across the galaxy like fire across dry grass. A human had completed the 3 trials of bonding. A human had won the right to marry a Valoran princess. A human would stand beside the heir to one of the greatest empires in known space. Some said it was impossible. They said the results had been faked, that the Queen had taken pity on the primitive creature and let him pass without truly completing the trials. Others said it was a sign that the Valoran Empire was weakening, that they had become so desperate that they would accept anyone into their royal bloodline. But those who had witnessed the trials knew the truth. They had seen the human emerge from the Chamber of Silence after 52 hours, still sane, still fighting. They had watched him endure 100 deaths of the woman he loved without breaking. They had heard him tear apart the contract of dissolution and speak words that even the wisest Valoran philosophers had never spoken. The human was not just worthy. He was extraordinary. The day of the official ceremony arrived, and the great coronation hall was filled with more beings than had ever gathered there before. Representatives from 100 different star systems stood in the vast chamber.
Owness.
Their strange faces and stranger bodies creating a sea of colors and shapes. Some had come to mock. Others had come to study. A few had come simply to witness history being made. Princess Yuna stood at the entrance to the hall, waiting for the great doors to open. She was wearing a gown of white and silver, the traditional colors of a Valoran bride. Her hair had been arranged in complex patterns that had taken her servants hours to complete. Jewels sparkled at her throat and wrists, worth more than most planets. But she did not care about any of it. She only cared about the man standing beside her. Han was dressed in a formal suit that had been made just for him. It was black and simple in the human style, but threads of silver had been woven into the fabric to honor Valoran tradition. He looked uncomfortable in the fancy clothes, and his hand kept reaching up to adjust his collar. Yuna smiled and took his hand. Are you nervous? Terrified, Han admitted. 100 alien species are waiting in there to stare at me. I would rather face the pirates again. Yuna laughed. It was a warm, bright sound that made several nearby servants look up in surprise. Valoran princesses were not supposed to laugh like that. You will be fine, she said. You survived the trials. This is just a party. Party with your mother watching my every move? My mother respects you now. I can see it in her eyes. Han raised his eyebrows. Really? Because when I look in her eyes, all I see is someone planning my funeral. Yuna laughed again and squeezed his hand. That is just her face. She looks at everyone that way. Great doors began to open, and light poured into the entrance hall. The sound of 1,000 voices fell silent as everyone turned to look at the princess and her human husband. Han took a deep breath. Here we go. We walked into the coronation hall together, hand in hand. Han could feel the eyes of every being in the room upon him. He could hear the whispers, the gasps, the sounds of surprise and curiosity. He knew that many of them were looking at him like he was some kind of strange animal that had wandered into a place. It did not belong. He did not care. He kept walking, kept his head held high, kept his hand in Yuna's. Queen Sora stood at the far end of the hall, at the top of a great staircase made of pure crystal. She was wearing robes of deep purple, the color of royalty, and a crown of silver sat upon her head. Behind her hung the banner of the Valoran Empire. A white moon on a field of black dot. Han and Yuna walked the length of the hall and stopped at the bottom of the stairs. They bowed their heads in respect. Rise, Queen Sora commanded. They stood up and looked at the Queen. Her silver eyes swept over them both. Lingering on Han for a long moment, Then she turned to address the crowd. "I have ruled this empire for 900 years, she began, her voice carrying across the vast hall. "I have seen species rise and fall. I have watched civilizations build themselves up from nothing and crumble into dust. I believed I understood strength. I believed I knew what it meant to be powerful." She paused, and her eyes found Han in the crowd below. I was wrong. The whispers that passed through the crowd were louder now, filled with confusion and curiosity. The Queen raised her hand, and silence fell once more. "This human has shown me something new. His species does not live as long as we do, but they live with a fire that we have forgotten. They do not have our abilities, so they created their own. They are not born with strength, so they forge it through struggle and failure and an almost absurd refusal to surrender." Queen Sora began to walk down the stairs, her purple robes flowing behind her like water. She stopped in front of Han and looked at him with those cold silver eyes. "The galaxy looks upon humanity and sees weakness," she said. "They see short lives and fragile bodies and primitive technology. But I have learned to see something else. I see a species that has survived everything its universe has thrown at it. Ice ages, plagues, wars, their own foolishness." A small smile crossed her face. "And now, apparently, my daughter's stubbornness." Laughter rippled through the hall. Even some of the Valoran nobles smiled, though they tried to hide it. Queen Sora raised her hand, and a servant came forward carrying a small pillow. On the pillow sat a circlet of silver, delicate and beautiful, with tiny gems that sparkled like stars. "This is the crown of bonding," the Queen said. "It has been worn by every royal consort for 10,000 years. It represents the joining of two souls, two families, two futures." She picked up the circlet and held it above Han's head. "Han of Earth, you have proven yourself not despite your humanity, but because of it. You have shown endurance that shames our warriors, strength that humbles our philosophers, and a love that teaches our poets. I grant you the crown's blessing." She placed the circlet on Han's head. It was light, almost weightless, but Han felt like it carried the weight of 1,000 years of history. "May your fire light our eternal halls," the Queen said, "and may your children inherit the best of both your worlds." The hall erupted in applause. Not everyone was clapping. Han could see some nobles standing with their arms crossed, their faces dark with disapproval. But many were applauding, and some were even cheering. Yuna threw her arms around him, not caring that the entire galaxy was watching. She kissed him in front of everyone, in front of her mother, in front of representatives from 100 star systems. When she finally pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." Han smiled and wiped a tear from her cheek. "We did it," he corrected. Together, later that night, after the ceremony was over and the guests had departed, Han and Yuna stood alone on a balcony overlooking the capital city. 3 moons hung in the sky, casting silver light over the towers and gardens below. "So," Yuna said, leaning against his shoulder, "what happens now?" Han thought about it. He thought about the life that lay ahead of them, the challenges they would face, the years they would have together. His life was short compared to hers. He would grow old and die while she remained young. They both knew this, but that was not what mattered. What mattered was that they would face every day together. What mattered was that they would love each other for as long as they could. "Now," Han said, "we live." Yuna smiled and took his hand. "Fall 7 times?" Han squeezed her fingers and looked up at the 3 moons of her world. "Stand up 8. And somewhere across the vast emptiness of space, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary star, humanity continued its journey through the universe. They did not know that one of their own had just changed the course of galactic history. They did not know that a simple man from Earth had proven to the stars that humans were more than anyone believed. But they would learn. In time, they would all learn, because that was what humans did. They surprised everyone. They exceeded every expectation. They refused to stay in the small boxes the universe tried to put them in, and they never, ever gave up.